Hi folks, today we're going to do a review of the talent builds for Arcane Mages as we jump into the Shadowlands Pre-Patch. I hope you're really enjoying the Pre-Patch so far, and if you're a fan of Arcane Mages, which ultimately haven't always been the most popular of the specs out there, this might be your time to shine. We're going to review quickly here the rating and Mythic Plus builds for the spec, and then we're going to talk about some of the differences that are coming to Arcane from BFA and talk about the viability. Ultimately, Arcane's looking really strong, and I think it's going to start to separate itself from the pack here rather early in the expansion. So as far as rating goes, on Tier 1, you're going to go with Amplification. Amplification is very strong. There has been some mana issues before Shadowlands went live, as far as what we're seeing with the 9.0 pre-patch, and we gained that kind of Arcane Barrage leveling perk that's there. But ultimately, if managing your mana is a little bit of a struggle, you can just go with Rule of Threes as the central go-to as well. But yeah, if you're trying to go from a min-max perspective for your raid build, Amplification is the way to go. Second tier, go with Shimmer. The added mobility makes a pretty fantastic approach. No global cooldowns associated with it, so big win. Tier 3, Rune of Power is the go-to there. No problem. If you're entirely new to playing Mage and you're not used to all the buttons that you're necessarily responsible for, Incanter's Flow could be a fallback for a player just introducing themselves. But Rune of Power gives you that 40% buff to your spell damage, so that's why it's the priority from this line. Tier 4, you want to go with Arcane Echo, just strictly more damage there. It gives you kind of that intermediate cleave. Resonance would give you pretty high damage in an AoE situation. Well, it gets a lot more viable in Mythic Plus, but Arcane Echo really makes a compelling case just to give you that added cleave ability, but still keep your DPS up. Alternatively, Chrono Shift is the go-to for Tier 5, so really Arcane Barrage, slowing enemies by 50% and increasing your movement speed by 50%. So really fun. Hey, like who will complain about more mobility for our mage friends? Tier 6, Arcane Orb is the go-to there, so no real necessary argument. It just costs a 1% aspect of your core mana, but it grants an arcane charge every time. So really easy way to put your spec together. And then finally, Tier 7, the go-to is Overpowered, and just ensuring that you can increase your damage by 50%, reduce your mana costs. So that's kind of looking back at Amplification. As long as you have relatively good control over your mana consumption, stacking Overpower, like your Arcane Orb with your Rune of Power, you can really splash. And we've got some burner ability here with Arcane as we're going into the pre-patch and then ultimately into Shadowlands. So real looking forward to that. If you're so interested, you should be prioritizing Mastery above all else, and then Critical Strike looking forward. Honestly, from an overall health perspective, I think Arcane is going to be the top spec, at least at the beginning of Shadowlands, based on how it's looking. You've got really high damage, you've got some really good defensives, and you've got some ranged AoE or cleave, depending on what talents you want to set yourself up for. Hey, like that's pretty smooth. It's not as big bursty as maybe Fire was at the end of both BFA or Legion, but I think it's going to be a really fun point in time for this kind of builder burner spec. Alternatively, if you are so interested in what the Mythic Plus build looks like, so not a lot of change there. First three tiers, totally the same. Amplification, Shimmer, and Ruin of Power. Tier 4, we do go with a little bit of a different approach. You go with Resonance, and that's actually just one of the differentiators there. Chrono Shift still stays the same, Arcane Orb stays the same, and Overpower stays the same. So this really kind of focuses on knocking out as many arcane barrages as possible, and that makes sense based on how the build works. Ultimately, in Tier 7, you've got a choice between Overpowered and Enlightened. Each of them has a credible case there. Honestly, depending on what you're looking at, if you've got more of a fortified week, you could go with Enlightened. Ultimately, it really just comes down to your mana management and what your preferences and priorities are. But this is a ton of fun. You can use Rule of Threes over Amplification right now, similar to the rating build. But I think as we step into the expansion, you'll want to incorporate Amplification into your base kit. Outside of that, folks, that's kind of one of the primary quick changes there from a spec talent build perspective. Arcane is really going to retain its ability to be a really high burst damage spec. So it won't take a lot of adjustment to learn if you played it at all during BFA, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see how our mana consumption can create some feast or famine scenarios for us. So looking forward to seeing how that works as we progress towards endgame with Shadowlands. All right, drop it down in the comments. Are you playing Arcane this year? If not, what are you going with? Are you going with a Frost or a Fire, or just avoiding mages entirely through the beginning of Shadowlands? What do you think about losing Corruption? We're going to be gaining Conduits and Legendaries here right away. It's a pretty crazy time as far as turnover of mechanics go, but I'm kind of excited for the change. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you're playing Horde, Alliance, what that looks like, and we'll see you soon. Later, folks.